plenary session is titled Geopolitics of Connectivity from Competition to Collaboration. Thank you so much for joining us post-lunch. We have an exciting discussion ahead of us. And may I now introduce the speakers and the moderator. We first have the moderator, Maria Titizian, who is the Editor-in-Chief, EVN Report, and lecturer at the American University of Armenia. Next, we have His Excellency Minister Ruben Rubinian, Vice President, National Assembly, Armenia. We have His Excellency Peter Szijjártó, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Hungary. We have His Excellency Lazar Gomanescu, Secretary General of the Permanent International Secretariat of the Organization of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation. Next, we have His Excellency Alibek Kwantirov, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kazakhstan. His Excellency David Bertolucci, Deputy Secretary General, Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs, France. And finally, we have His Excellency Mr. Sachin Pilot, who's member of the Rajasthan Legislative Assembly and former Minister of State of Corporate Affairs and Communications and IT of India. And now over to you, Maria, to take us ahead with the proceedings.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and honor for me to be moderating the panel this afternoon, which is called Geopolitics of Connectivity from Competition to Collaboration. We've talked a lot this morning about global fragmentation and geopolitical divisions. And as they deepen globally, the need for robust, sustainable, and efficient connectivity routes has never been more critical. In response, countries across the world are realigning their economic strategies, seeking new ways to strengthen supply chains and foster collaboration amid rising tensions. And now, for those of us living in the South Caucasus, we understand that very well, very intimately. And the regions at the crossroads of Asia, Eurasia, and Europe are now at the forefront of this shift, and this includes the Gulf, the Mediterranean, and the South Caucasus. I'm going to be starting the conversation today with Ruben Rubinian. You are not only the Vice President of the National Assembly, but you are also Armenia's Special Envoy to normalization of Armenia-Turkey relations. So you understand the difficulty of negotiating with a partner with whom you have historical, political, geopolitical grievances. How do countries navigate these divisions, these geopolitical divisions, to create a way to connect economies, spur investment and growth? And what would this actually look like from your own experience?
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation to this panel, and I want to welcome our honorable guests. I think the simple answer to your question is basically written in the name of this panel, which is from competition to collaboration. It's as simple as that, as it may seem, but of course, if we dig deeper, it becomes more difficult. With regards to Turkey, of course, there are historical grievances on the societal level, and at least I can speak on the Armenian part. Of course, we have the history, and we remember the history, and we will always remember this history. But there is, I feel, a misconception in the outside world regarding Armenia-Turkey relations that this historic burden is the reason that Turkey and Armenia don't have normal relations or diplomatic relations or an open border. In reality, at least on the part of the Armenian government, the current Armenian government, all the governments before, since Armenia got its independence in 1991, history hasn't been part of our strategy when it comes to normalizing relations with Turkey. We have always been ready to have normalized relations with Turkey, an open border, diplomatic relations, and we still are ready for that. And if there is a political will from our Turkish neighbors, we can have a fully normalized relation tomorrow. When it comes to communications, it's not a secret that the South Caucasus is notorious for having closed borders, and it's true for Armenia, but not only. It's true for Azerbaijan as well, it's true for Georgia, it's true for Turkey, and so on. I think right now we have a historic chance to turn the South Caucasus from a geopolitical dead end into a crossroad of peace. And our position is that communications should not become hostages of geopolitical competition, but rather a means to change the negative dynamics and to build peace and cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. I will come back with a follow-up question. I'd like now to move on to Foreign Minister Jarto, if I pronounced that correctly. For some time, Armenia's and Hungary's relationship was somewhat difficult for reasons that we all know. These tensions subsided approximately a year ago with the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries. Moving forward, from Hungary's perspective, how can, for example, since Mr. Rubinian talked about Crossroads of Peace, how can an initiative like the Crossroads of Peace contribute to peace and economic development in the South Caucasus?
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. For my friend Ararat, whom I'm gonna meet a little bit later, I'm very happy to be here on this panel and happy to be back to Yerevan. You know, I'm representing a country which is located in Central Europe. And we in Central Europe had been losers for a 40-year-long period of the Cold War, when the world was divided into blocks. And we are also neighbors of Ukraine, a country which has been in war for the third consecutive year now, and we are faced with all the challenges which is posed by a war in the neighborhood. So if there is a country on earth which understands the importance of the initiatives type of view which you have mentioned, which aims at connectivity and economic cooperation instead of being at war, then Hungary is among those countries for sure. Because what we see now in the world is really alarming and concerning. What we see is that all the political movements are pointing towards the world being divided into blocks again. And unfortunately, the European Union, the presidency of which is being fulfilled by Hungary, is somewhat contributing to that. I've been in this position for 10 years now, so I have participated in almost all foreign ministers' meetings of the last 10 years in the European Union. Whenever we have discussed a situation, for example, in the Caucasus region, whenever we discussed any war or any armed conflict in the world, the position of the Europeans was that that given war, that given armed conflict, including the one in the Caucasian region, must be resolved through dialogue, through discussion, through diplomacy around the negotiating table, and not by weapons. And I regret a lot that this approach is now kind of being left in the past. So Hungary, based on our own national interest, obviously, we are against the world being divided into blocks again, and we are in favor of connectivity, and we are in favor of creating circumstances for a civilized East-to-West cooperation. And in this regard, the initiative you have mentioned is something that must be put into consideration very thoroughly. What I understand is the following. Although there are politicians who are bringing forward this, let's say, Cold War agenda and aiming at the world being divided into blocks again, on the territory of on the level of real life, on the level of common sense, this east to west cooperation is tighter than ever before. And let me give you two examples finally coming from Hungary. First, Hungary became and I bring these examples from economy. That's why I say that in the normal life, east-to-west cooperation is still going on, and that gives us a hope, I think, that such initiatives you have mentioned, aiming at connectivity, aiming at economic cooperation instead of war and armed conflicts, could be successful. First, Hungary became a meeting point of the Eastern and Western investors of Europe. Because what happened? We are one of the first countries in the world where the free German premium car makers are present. And we are the only country in the world where 5 of the top 10 Eastern battery manufacturers are present, among them the biggest Chinese. And guess what? Why the Chinese came to Hungary to invest, to build factories? Because the Germans are present, and because they are supplying the Germans. And this is not only that they build factories in the same country, it's not only that they build factories in the same city, they are building their factories next to each other, the Chinese and the German. And if there's such a tight cooperation on the field of economy in such a strategically important industry like electric automobile industry between Chinese and Germans, between Koreans and Germans, then I think that there is still a path towards a civilized east-to-west cooperation. Last example. We are now building a nuclear power plant in Hungary. The main constructor is a Russian company called Rosatom. I think everybody knows it. We are criticized for that on a political level in Europe. But what happens? Rosatom is working together with major German, French, American, Austrian, and Swiss subcontractors in Hungary. So when I go to the site where the Russians are the main constructors building a nuclear power plant, I see German, French, Swiss, Austrian companies working on the ground, on the site. That shows to me that such political initiatives aiming at enforcing trans-regional east-to-west cooperation instead of wars can be successful because on the ground of real life, this is the reality, this is what is going on. So I think that the initiative is something that really deserves to be put into consideration thoroughly and discussed.
I will ask a follow-up question immediately because it's related. Mr. Foreign Minister, you talked about your own experience in Hungary. And here in the South Caucasus, we oftentimes talk about the importance of economic cooperation and opening up transport routes. And Armenia has been speaking in the language of peace since the war that we experienced. Now, the country that Hungary considers its closest friend in the South Caucasus is engaging in counterproductive behavior. In your view, how can Budapest mitigate this unproductive behavior?
Once again, I want to underline that we do believe that politics is a job based on experience. And the experience is that wars never conclude on the battlefield, they conclude around the negotiating table. Therefore, I think here in the Caucasian region, we could be instrumental, and I hope it's not an exaggeration. Why? Because we are in a position that we can talk to both parties of this conflict on both occasions based on mutual respect. We have just renewed the diplomatic connections with Armenia like 2 years back. What happened since then? We have broken the record of trade last year ever. We have launched the direct air connection between the two countries in July. We have been hosting altogether 1,000 children of displaced families in Hungary on summer vacation. We have just allocated an additional 800,000 euros to give support to the Armenian Christian Church, to give this support to the families who are in need. We are about to start a cooperation on the field of energy and setting up the Joint Economic Commission to move forward with the economic cooperation. We are opening our embassy here. Armenia is opening its embassy in Budapest. In the meantime, We are having a strategic cooperation with Azerbaijan, having a strategic cooperation on the field of energy, oil and gas as well, up to mutual ownership in important infrastructure. That puts us in a position that we can help the procedure to finalize the peace agreement between the two countries. In my last talks with both parties, it was an option that Budapest could also serve as a venue to sign the agreement of peace. Signing an agreement about peace in a peace-loving capital of a peace-loving country, of peace-loving people. I think this is the instrumental help we can give there. It was at the end of 2021, just after Christmas, when we have contributed for 5 prisoners of war of Armenia to be released by Azerbaijan and brought back to Yerevan. That's what we have organized already. We have very tight cooperation with the Christian church here, and I do believe that here we could be instrumental in helping the peace agreement to come to a reality, giving back the right to millions of people here in the Caucasian region, including Armenia, to get back their right to have a safe and peaceful life in their own homes.
Thank you, Mr. Foreign Minister. Mr. Komanescu, you are the Secretary General of BSEC. It's a large organization, representing almost 350 million people, covering territory of 20 million square kilometers, and also a region that has had its share of conflict. Again, I want to come back to this initial question. In your experience, how can countries overcome these geopolitical divisions to create connectivity routes, to connect economies for the prosperity of the people themselves? So like concrete examples, if you can, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the question. But before trying to answer to that, allow me first to express my thanks to my friend and Foreign Minister of Armenia, Ararat Mirzoyan, for having invited me to participate in this forum, and particularly grateful for the fact that I was allocated as member of a panel with such distinguished participants. And point number one. Point number two, I would also like to underline the relevance of this forum and the fact that both the timing and the topic are quite well chosen. And perhaps I may be subjective a little bit, but what I have in mind is that this forum takes place during the period when Armenia is holding the chairmanship in office of the organization which I had the honor to represent. And associating this with the topics chosen for the forum, including connectivity, makes me thank the Armenian side for organizing this forum in this period, which means raising the relevance and the assertiveness of the organization. And all the more so I am happy to be here in this panel, as topics related to connectivity have a lot to do with the activity of my organization. Be it connectivity in transport, be it connectivity in energy, be it connectivity, very important I would say, connectivity of minds, because it has a lot to do with understanding and making progress towards cooperation. So I feel that I could elaborate a little bit about what my organization is doing. But before that, getting inspired by the title of this panel, which is from geopolitics of connectivity, from cooperation to collaboration. That brings me to make, and I hope you'll allow me, 2 or 3 very brief remarks. I think that everybody agrees with the fact that competition has, through history, been an engine for growth when that was a fair competition. when competition is used as an instrument for domination of control or control, it doesn't work. And you have to say that if we look into the history of the Black Sea region, we've been witnessing situations when this region has been, let's say, area of competition. I'm afraid from time to time, even nowadays, we may see this type of things. On the contrary, this region is also an example, a good example that when the competition was fair, mutual understanding prevailed, much has been done. And the fact itself that this organization has been there for 32 years speaks by itself in this respect. This is my first remark. Second remark, still related to globalization, competition, and cooperation. Okay, we have seen, especially since pandemics, also in the context of the war in Ukraine, we've seen a drive towards diminishing dependencies, getting independency, getting resilience, and so on and so on. I would say that that is a little bit contrary to the globalization. Globalization, we want it or not, of course, it changed a lot as framework. But globalization will continue to be there for good. We have to look to adapt to the new developments, including digitalization of society and so on. And if that's the case, we have to admit that interdependencies will continue and even will grow, of course, influenced by the new developments. This is why, in my opinion, when talking about resilience, instead of, how to say, seeking autonomous resilience, we may perhaps look more to the necessity of building resilient interdependencies. And my third comment deriving therefrom is that, and now coming closer to the area of connectivity. We've seen in the recent past 10 years or so, series of initiatives aimed at providing for transport, connectivity, and so on. But some of them, at least, I see them having been developed not necessarily starting from the idea of mutual complementarity and mutual reinforcing, more or less a kind of a competition as well. But happily, we see now that there is a kind of a change in this respect. And I see that when it comes to, for example, initiatives or projects like the BRI, Middle Corridor, now people initially, if I will remember, I may be mistaken, but I hope not. But I do remember when talk was about the Middle Corridor, at a certain moment, there was a kind of reluctance from some countries, including from the European Union. Now I see that, and this is a very good development. I see an increased awareness about the fact how important it is to seek connectivity through complementarity, through mutual reinforcing. So these were the few comments which I wanted to make in this respect. And now, very briefly on BISEC. We've been trying to work to develop connectivity, to help developing connectivity in the region. Because if we talk about BRI, if we talk about global gateway, or India, Middle East, Europe corridor, or something like this, we will see that you cannot avoid the Black Sea region. And here comes the importance of the Black Sea region as a real bridge between Asia and Europe. And from this perspective, a series of significant projects have been launched here. I'm referring to, for example, to the Black Sea Highway Ring, or the motorways of the sea. Of course, advancement has not been that much on the physically speaking, but we have developed within this organization already, kind of, let's say, pre-feasibility development of these projects. And hopefully, when the atmosphere of peace and cooperation will come back in this region, this project may advance. Another aspect which we are looking at with particular attention. It's about how to develop connectivity and alternative routes of supply and transport, to keep in mind the importance of being environmentally friendly. And from this perspective, I would like to really welcome the fact that an very interesting project, and I hope will become a kind of a source of inspiration, has been developed by Azerbaijan, Georgia, Romania, and Hungary. I am referring to the green energy cable, which is being now projected and I hope will become a reality as soon as possible. One other aspect which I wanted to highlight is that the fact that it is extremely important when seeking alternatives for connectivity to pay particular attention to initiatives coming from the region itself, from the countries in this region. And here we've been listening in the morning to the Prime Minister of Armenia. I think that projects like the Crossroads of Peace and others coming from this region can contribute, and the Black Sea Economic Organization is there to help in promoting this type of projects. And finally, coming back to what I mentioned at the beginning, talking about connectivity, of course, physical connectivity, infrastructure, transport, energy, and so on is quintessential. But equally important is connectivity of minds. And here this organization has been trying to bring, albeit a modest contribution. This is why we avail, although we are an organization for economic cooperation, we avail of a working group on culture, which is aimed exactly at developing human contacts and through their better understanding and through their increasing mutual confidence and prospects for cooperation and peace. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Speaking about alternative routes of supply and connectivity, landlocked countries face unique challenges. In Armenia, we are not only a landlocked country, but 2 of our 4 borders are closed, and this presents extremely unique challenges. Mr. Koandirov, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, how do you think landlocked, or do you think landlocked countries have a new role as pivotal hubs in the emerging era of land-based connectivity, and how has Kazakhstan addressed this?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, distinguished guests, distinguished participants. It is a pleasure to participate at such a relevant panel, and thank you for your question. You mentioned very correctly that we are in this region, we are all land-locked country, and especially Central Asia, so we should not just act just on ourselves, but to be a group, an integral group of trading partners, of investment partners, and not only partnering with the bordering countries, but also with countries who are a bit further away, like Armenia. And while developing the Caspian Corridor, which is also the part, it also lies along the Belt and Road Initiative. Also, we are working on the Global Gateway Platform Program. We're also working on NorthSouth Corridor. So not only Central Asian countries, but also Iran. This is the main route from China to Europe. We should develop it, and so it is a matter of focus at the moment for Kazakhstan and for other countries, and we would like also to see Armenia as with its own initiative, Crossroads of Peace. So of course on the condition when there is a mutually agreed settlement of all the unblocking of all the communication and routes. So I think it will be beneficial for all participants along the route, including Kazakhstan and Armenia. And we are very much interested in peace and in resolving all the issues, either it be infrastructure, investment, trades, also cultural exchanges. Just recently, representative business delegation from Armenia visited Kazakhstan, visited actually the east of Kazakhstan, where the Khorgos Eastern Gate, so to say, special economic zone is situated. When the door opens from Chinese goods to Europe, and they expressed their interest in developing the infrastructure in the country, because it's also in the interests of Armenia. And Armenia is working, Armenian businessmen are working very actively currently, connecting Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Iran with its supplies to move goods. And so what I also wanted to mention is that, as Mr. Siarto mentioned, so Hungary is also putting its efforts to peace negotiations. Kazakhstan, on the initiation of our president, provided goods officers platform in Almaty for meeting of MFA leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan. So we are looking very positively at peace negotiations, and since it will directly affect economy, social ties, infrastructure, trade, and just to mention that we in Kazakhstan have a big diaspora of Armenians who are also helping us develop these projects, and I hope that take into account, into consideration these diasporal ties, the connections will be even stronger. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to move now to Mr. Bertolotti. France and Armenia have very, very warm relations with one another, and I want to ask sort of the European perspective from you. What role do you think the EU can play in concrete terms to make the Crossroads of Peace initiative a regional reality?
Thank you very much for the question, and first of all allow me to express also my appreciation to our Armenian and Indian co-hosts for putting together this event. And as you said, as a representative of a country that is a close friend to Armenia, I'm particularly pleased to be here and to be discussing an item that is so important for building peace in the South Caucasus. There's sometimes the question whether connectivity is a condition, or let's say an enabler, or a result of peace. And in a way, it's probably a bit of both. Definitely, connectivity must serve peace, but it's also a matter of sovereignty for a country. And I think when President Macron outlined a year ago in Astana that stronger connectivity between Europe and Central Asia is a strategic objective for France and for Europe, he also underscored that this requires lasting peace and stability in the region. And in this respect, of course, we give our full support to the conclusion of a peace treaty between Armenia and Azerbaijan as soon as possible, and we welcome the recent progress on border delimitation. I think one of our messages in this respect is that connectivity should not be weaponized. What do I mean by that? I mean that it can't be a way to pressure a country into, say, opening extraterritorial corridors or imposing the presence of foreign forces on another territory. And so that's why in particular we like very much the approach of Corridors for Peace, which His Excellency the Prime Minister again described earlier this morning. Regional connectivity, to be truly beneficial, has to be based on the full respect of a country's sovereignty and jurisdiction, also on principles of equality and reciprocity. And of course, this implies the reopening of all borders as well. Now, you asked what specifically we are doing about this, we're active both at the bilateral and the European level. At the bilateral level, we are actually quite actively engaged in supporting various projects here in Armenia, but also I'd stress that regionally. I mean, to give you an example, here we will soon second a technical expert. We have many, but we'll have one dedicated to connectivity issues with the Armenian government. And at the regional level, we also have people helping with French expertise in the railway sector in Georgia, or in digital connectivity in Kazakhstan. At the EU level, of course, the Global Gateway Initiative is the flagship project, and there's actually quite a sizable amount of money that is available in terms of investment over the 2021-2027 period for Armenia, about 2.6 billion euros potentially, and there has already been engagement in the Global Gateway Initiative, in particular with an investors forum in Brussels earlier this year. And one final element that I could mention to exemplify what I'm saying is, also in terms of people-to-people connectivity, because that's very important, and allow me to welcome and praise the official opening just yesterday, actually, of the dialogue on visa liberalization between the EU and Armenia. Because again, it's an important part of the relationship, and it will be underpinned by some structural reforms that are particularly important for connectivity and hence for peace and stability.
Thank you very much. And finally, our final speaker, Mr. Pilot. I was doing some research and microphone off. You were the youngest member of parliament at 26, so you have a lot of years of experience already. India is becoming a very productive player in the region, and perhaps the most important is the India-Middle East-Europe corridor. We speak about corridors a lot in our region. How do you envision this corridor contributing to the strengthening of connectivity in the greater region?
Well, thank you, Marian. Thank you for reminding me how old I am. And I want to thank, first of all, the hosts for having us all here. I was last in Armenia about 14 years ago. And I have to say, much has changed since I was here last. And the fact that this dialogue, being the first in its inception, has got so many of us here today, tells you two things. One, that the agenda of the dialogue is where everyone is bought into, and the place is hospitable, and people regard Yerevan and Armenia and the people of Armenia in very good light. And that's why all of us are here. I heard my fellow panelists give their views on the same issue. I just want to take a minute to sort of redefine what I think is important. We talk about connectivity, talked about competition in the session. Now, connectivity traditionally has meant trading routes, sea routes, air routes, rail, road networks. But now connectivity has a different meaning to it. Now it has to do with pipelines, gas, oil, and the new currency in the world, data. So underground sea cables, underwater cable, fiber optics, those are all part of the global connectivity. And I think it's important in every region to view this in a holistic fashion. The initiative that we're talking about is something that I personally welcome. I think it's a good initiative, but it must be done transparently. It must be done, like my friend from France has said, with respecting the sovereignty, the integrity of the host country. I think it's very important to have buy-in from the host country when you talk about connecting regions or countries through continents. Coming from India, I think Maria was talking about the new G20 proposal of connecting Europe through Middle East to India. One has to think about how a country can de-risk its logistics. We've seen great turbulence in the recent past, what's happening with the war in Russia, Ukraine, with Israel, Palestine, with COVID that gutted almost everything that we know. It has changed the entire paradigm of how we think of connectivity and supply chain and what we must do to de-risk. India, for example, we import 83% of all our energy needs. Now, when you import from parts of the world that are not so stable, you have to got to think of alternative routes. And I think it's important for us to understand it's not just efficiencies and cost cutting when you talk about connectivity. It's also about giving countries like Armenia, which are landlocked, an equal opportunity to be able to unlock the potential they have because of their geographic location. We talk about clean energy, for example, how the world is now pushing for clean energy. For us, India, for example, for us to move from fossil-based energy to a clean energy, the transition requires many things, including batteries, for example. 70% of the cobalt in the world comes from Congo. Now, unless we have efficient routes and linkages to countries like Congo, I think the transition materials such as copper, lithium, nickel, cobalt, graphite, the entire market today is about $340 billion. By 2040, the market for these minerals will become $750 billion. Now, for all this to happen, we've got to have efficient linkages. The Crossroads of Peace, for example, I was watching the details of it when the Prime Minister was making his comments. It's something that will come to fruition at some point. My only advice, standing as an outsider observing this, is that it's better to seize the opportunity when it presents itself, as opposed to waiting for the ultimate outcome, which will come but much later on, and time will have passed. Nothing will bring back what has already happened. But for the future generations, it's better to forget the past, learn from those mistakes, and then act in a practical fashion, which is mutually beneficial for everybody. We were just mentioning before we started talking about how the trade routes can be much more realigned. For us in India, it's obviously better to have alternate routes. The Suez Canal cannot serve for all times to come. So we must have connectivity through this part of the world onwards to Europe. The neighborhood, of course, is something someone once said in the earlier panel, is that you don't choose our neighbors. But some of the countries in this part of the world were not neighbors. They were one country. So choices have to be made. It's best to learn to live with the choices that have been made for us. But I'm of the opinion that competition itself in this discussion, has a very negative connotation, and that should not be. A healthy competition, a rules-based competition, a transparent competition is healthy for the economy and for global trade. I won't take names, but there are entities in the countries in the world that are forcing some nations to fall into what I call a debt trap. In the name of infrastructure, you give out money that may never be fruitful, and the asset creation doesn't take place, and nations fall into this debt trap. That's avoidable. So if the competition is healthy, it's progressive, it's forward-looking, it's rules-based, everybody will appreciate that. In the end, I just feel that this initiative, if it comes to fruition, will show that Armenia and Azerbaijan have put their differences of the past behind them. It'll give Iran and Turkey an opportunity to show their diplomatic skills and how they can bring people together. It will certainly give Russia a good opportunity to show that its allies and friends can work together. And it will be beneficial for Europe to have a new trade route towards Asia and into India.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rubinian, I'm going to come with a follow-up question for you because you spoke briefly, and then because our time is running out, I will ask just for final comments from the rest of the panelists. This morning, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan gave a pretty in-depth presentation of the Crossroads of Peace, and he showed the transportation routes, the railroads, the roadways. And, you know, I tried to ask the question to the foreign minister of Hungary as well about the partnership that we have to develop with Azerbaijan if we want this to be a reality. Otherwise, it looks lovely on paper, but it can be a very naive approach, because if you don't have a partner who agrees with you or who sees the same vision for peace with you, how do you mitigate that? How do you move beyond that? I understand, and it's very commendable that Armenia's government is speaking in the language of peace, but what are the concrete actions that need to take place in order for that dialogue, because it's called Yerevan dialogue, with Azerbaijan to take place, and also taking into consideration the other regional players?
Thank you. First, I'd like to say a couple of words about the Crossroads of Peace project. It's a very simple concept, and it's based on basic principles of international law and on basic logic. We are ready to have unblocked communications, roads, railroads, cables, and everything else, you name it, based on the respect of sovereignty and territorial integrity of parties, in this case Armenia and Azerbaijan and all countries surrounding them, based on exercising jurisdiction of respective parties. I think it's very logical that a country would have the right to and would like to exercise its jurisdiction on its territory and have its territorial integrity respected, and based on the principles of equality and reciprocity. Again, it would be very logical that if a country uses the territory of the neighboring country to transport goods and people, the other party would expect the same rules and the same preferences for itself. And this is, I can't imagine anyone arguing against this, and there can be only one explanation for anyone to argue against these very basic, just and logical principles. The only case is when this person or his state is not interested in building architecture of peace, but is interested in building an architecture of conflict. And unfortunately, if we look at the positions of Azerbaijan, you can clearly see that they are directed at creating a new architecture of conflict, because you can even see that in the namings of, or the headlines of the projects. From our side, it's Crossroads of Peace. We want the Caucasus to be this big crossroad of peace. By the way, not only Armenia, we want the whole Caucasus to be a crossroads of peace, because without our neighbors it's impossible, and it's understandable. But unfortunately, from the Azerbaijani side, they have decided that they can name a road on a territory of Armenia, which is disrespectful and illogical. They have decided that they should put forward conditions on how transport routes should operate on the territory of Armenia, and their position is that if this doesn't happen, they will keep blockading Armenia. So you can see that all their positions are aimed at creating a new architecture of conflict at times where there is a truly historic opportunity to create an architecture of peace. And by the way, regarding security, Azerbaijan, as it is known, and those who support Azerbaijan voice about the necessity of third parties guaranteeing security over connectivity. But I think that's, again, illogical, because if we want peace, well, and at least Armenia does want peace, that means that the people should interact. That means that an Armenian passing through the territory of Azerbaijan should feel safe, and it's Azerbaijan's responsibility to guarantee the safety of the Armenian passing through the territory of Azerbaijan, and vice versa. the whole notion that an Azerbaijani passing through Armenia's territory shouldn't meet Armenians on its way is again in the logic of conflict, not in the logic of peace. Coming back to your question, what action is needed for peace to happen? Again, the answer is very, very simple. If the Azerbaijani leadership decides that they want peace, peace is possible literally tomorrow. Literally tomorrow. If they have or create political will to have peace, we will have open communications tomorrow based on the principles I just talked about. If they want peace, we can sign the peace treaty tomorrow because as it has been talked about, Armenia has sent the last edition of the draft peace treaty to the Azerbaijani side, which includes all the paragraphs which have already been agreed, and those parts which have not been agreed on have been eliminated, but we think that these paragraphs which are agreed are already a sound basis for a peace treaty, and all the questions that have been left out can be discussed in the future. So political will needs to rise among the leadership of Azerbaijan, and peace is more than possible tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Just if I could ask 2 minutes each, please. I know it's very short, but unfortunately it's a large panel and we are already running out of time. And reflecting on the reality that in the 21st century to have closed borders doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for the governments, for the civilians, for the region, or for the world. What steps can we take as a global community, having a global conversation, if you will, to make sure that those closed borders no longer exist? And aside from political will, yes, it's political will, but what is the role of world powers, what is the role of other countries in ensuring that we dismantle those closed borders? Yeah.
Thank you so much. I was born in a city which was then divided by global history, and the two sides of the city with the river Danube in between found themselves in two different countries, Hungary and Czechoslovakia, then Hungary and Slovakia. And since part of the family remained on the other side, I remember those long hours from my childhood, which we were lining up on a bridge under very severe weather circumstances, waiting for hours just to be allowed by the border guards of another country to enter the other country to visit relatives and family members. And those who have not done so cannot even imagine the significance and importance of friendly, peaceful cooperation, mutual respect in international politics, instead of constant stigmatization, lecturing, and educating each other. I think if we really want to come to a global system where the cooperation is being placed on the first point of the agenda, instead of wars and instead of conflicts, then we have to bring back international politics to the basis of mutual respect. Currently, mutual respect is missing from international politics. Whoever is speaking out of the mainstream is being immediately stigmatized, being either the spies of the Russians, either Putin or Trump or whatever. If there is not a willingness of the stakeholders of international politics to enter into negotiations with each other, if we are not ready to open our minds to understand the others, to listen to each other, then we will come to a stage where the concept of war will outnumber the concept of peaceful cooperation, and then we will find closed borders again. So maybe if we have to use two words, an expression, which is the way forward, then I would say mutual respect.
Still on this idea about how to facilitate or to hopefully come to facilitating or eliminating these difficulties at border crossing. And here, if you allow me, I may come up with something which is closer to the economy and where the organization, the basic organization, has been trying to help. Well, it's a limited initiative and project which have been developing, but nevertheless it speaks by itself. It's the so-called BISEC permit system, which allows for the transport of goods on tracks based upon uniformization of the documentation to facilitate the crossing the borders, eliminating long lines, long time spent there by the poor drivers, not to speak about their living conditions there. This is one example, and I think that that kind of projects could become, don't take me as like modesty or my organization, could become a kind of, let's say, source of inspiration. Similarly, we've developed the so-called trade facility strategy, which is closely linked to this, facilitating cross borders. And this project is practically finalized, and I do take the advantage of being here, and as I mentioned, being under the chairmanship in office of the the Republic of Armenia. We hope that during this chairmanship in office, this state facility strategy would be formally adopted by the member states of the BISEC. Thank you.
You know, we still have so many conflicts, territorial conflicts or trade wars, economic clashes, though we are living in the 21st century, and I think we should seriously think of how to get rid of these issues, either it be political or economic. When I was doing my Master of Applied Economics in the United States, I was doing a research on how protectionism, trade protectionism, what kind of advantages or disadvantages it brings to countries who are conducting these protectionism measures or non-tariff barriers. So we saw that it's a prisoner's dilemma. Nobody wins. There might be some, some instant advantages for one or two countries, but in general, in the long run, there is no way there will be, an internal protectionism or there would be, only a win situation for that particular country. No win. So a win-win is when everybody's involved. And today, the topic of our meeting is Yerevan dialogue. I think everything should be done through the dialogue. This is the only way how to make a progress, because we are living in a different generation now with the new technology, digital technologies, and so I think every conflict should be settled in this way, only peacefully. Thank you.
Well, Maria, you asked about the closed borders and what we can do about it. Actually, borders are not closed by accident, and of course, it's not a geographical, constraint. Not in the 21st century, not anymore. So it's a political symptom, and it's a symptom of what I called earlier the weaponization of connectivity. It's a way to try and exercise pressure, and in response to that. I think that we must be very firm on principles, on the principles of sovereignty, equality, full jurisdiction. And I was actually quite pleased that I heard a lot of my colleagues and co-panelists in the past hour use the very same terms and the very same principles. And so we have to be very, very firm on those values. And be strong partners with countries like Armenia that stand for those values and principles, even when it's very, very difficult, and maybe others would like you to do more reckless things. You must stand firm on principles, knowing that you can count on strong partners to support you and to sustain those principles with you. This is certainly something that is very dear to France's heart and to all the French authorities, and this is the kind of support that we want to continue to provide to Armenia over the long run.
Now, Maria, since I have the last word, sort of a lighter note. You see, you were talking about closed borders, etc., and we must learn from the past. We've had 2 world wars, and both, don't mind me saying this, but were caused because of Europe. And today, Europe has a common currency, it has open borders, common visa, and they've moved on. So we in Asia, South Asia, or Caucasus must learn from what has happened. But whatever has to happen in this particular region, I think can only happen if every country feels it's in their self-interest to do it. Nobody will do it on advice or on other person's interest. Every country must feel it's in their best interest to loosen or open border controls and for trade and migration and people's flow to happen. And that can only happen with sound advice, with discussions, dialogues, negotiations, and a little bit of nudging from any of us who can do it. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, our time is up. Thank you to the esteemed panelists for your very interesting and constructive comments, and thank you for listening.
Back here at 3:30 p.m. for the next panel, A Global Order in Churn, Seeking Solutions.